Mother Jones piece does discuss a lot of the state by state legislation that's being pushed, or it sort of breaks it down into the different classes of legislation because so many states are pushing variations of the same thing. But one of the big pushes is from an organization called the Eagle Forum, which was actually founded by someone named Phyllis Schlafly way back in the 50s and 60s. She was a huge anti-gay activist back in the day. And another group called the Alliance Defending Freedom. So, them and groups like the Heritage Foundation, these are largely right-wing evangelical-based sort of anti-LGBT and I guess probably other anti-civil rights legislation. They sponsor a lot of this legislation. They do a lot of lobbying on this work, and they have been behind something called the Vulnerable Child Protection Act in the South Dakota legislature. But it isn't limited to South Dakota. 18 other states have very similarly worded pieces of legislation passing through their legislatures at the same time. And it essentially makes it a felony to provide gender-affirming medical care to youth under the age of 16, which is in direct contravention of the guidelines of the Endocrine Society, the American College of Pediatrics, American Medical Association, so on and so forth. Every major, medical society, and, I would imagine these are mostly endocrinologists when you're talking about youth and hormone replacement therapy. So I'm curious about the level of and the surge of this legislation across the country at the state level, and not just about the felony for medical care, but also for lots of other aspects of trans life, whether it be athleticism, youth sports. We're talking about the rights of children, the rights of parents to, be part of these decisions or not, or the rights of children to be free of their parents' decisions, so on and so forth. And so, I'm just curious what everybody thinks about legislation like this. And a lot of it's passing on largely party line votes. In some cases, I believe in Utah, there was a case of a Republican governor actually vetoing one of it. So Governor Spencer Cox, a Republican governor of Utah, actually vetoed one. It was not this piece of legislation, but it was legislation that was going to stop trans youth from being able to compete in school sports. And I think he vetoed that, giving an explanation saying that, the challenges and hurdles faced by trans and non-binary youth are already so high to begin with, that he just didn't really want to be adding to that in any sort of competitive sports context. And just to give context to that, one more thing I'm going to say is the Trevor Project in 2021 reported that over half of trans and non-binary youth in the United States have considered suicide at some point in their life.
And to summarize the points of the Mother Jones article, is that this recent surge of anti-trans legislation has been something that has not been out of standard lawmakers saying, I think that we should, do this, or listening to necessarily the will of the people and their constituents advocating for, we want, this bill passed, we want this protection. It has very much been the legislatures themselves working with high donor religious extremist groups, trying to get this passed and then imposing that on to the rest of the population.
Well, isn't that so often the case?
Yes, it is definitely something where, it's a consistent issue, but the main point with this is saying, this is not something that is even, as you said earlier, this is something that goes against the First Amendment. This goes against our founding principles, and yet is something that is being attacked because of another organization.
I think it's important for us to take a moment to talk a little bit about what actual hormonal intervention in any patient who is exploring gender identity, exploring who they are, or who are making those types of affirmations entails. And this applies particularly with young people. When someone is in puberty or they are pre-puberty, there are medications that can be prescribed to slow or to diminish the progression of puberty. And this is typically what the first step is. So imagine that you're 11. You were born physiologically male or perceived to be male. There are steps that would be the first one that I can imagine that an endocrinologist would take, is say, listen, this young person is probably on the precipice of puberty. If they need more time to think about kind of where their life is going, who they are, where they stand on all of this, this is the first option. Then the next step is for actual hormones to be prescribed to change the hormonal profile of that patient. So I think that this is a very important thing to point out, because with young people, I don't really think that it's going to do so much damage. I'm not a doctor. I am trained though as a medical and life sciences attorney. So I have some exposure to this, and I also have my own lived experience. But I think that it's very important for us to kind of wade in the nuance here, and to understand that the first step is not going to be to wash a young person's bloodstream with new hormones to completely change their profile. That is not the first step. The first step is typically to kind of pause puberty or their hormonal development kind of where it is, so that they don't have to necessarily have to deal with the irreversible effects that puberty can cause, such as secondary sex traits like skeletal changes, like voice changes. What are a few others that you guys can think of here? Those are the two that strike first.
Those are the two major parts. In terms of puberty blockers, the effects is it can stop or limit facial hair and body hair, deepening of the voice, broadening of shoulders, growth of Adam's apple, growth of gonads, breast development, broadening of hips, periods.
Yes.
And then and that's by gender, and then for both it is growth in height, development of sex drive, impulsive, rebellious, or risk-taking behavior, accumulation of calcium in the bones, and fertility.
Right.
Puberty blockers are typically considered very safe. There's not any known negative effects on bone development or height from taking them. As you said, is a pause, but the research is still a little bit limited due to the novelty of it. And we don't know the long-term effects until people get older, but so far we have not seen any negative effects from long-term going on puberty. Meanwhile, the upsides are, of course, being able to be far more affirmed within your gender, not needing to have top surgery, for example, or needing to go through the distress of your body literally moving away from your perception of it.
Right.
Thanks for watching. If you want to support our mission to transform politics into service, please like this video, subscribe, follow us on social media, and consider joining our Patreon, where you'll get early access to our interviews as well as other exclusive content. Links are in the description. Peace out.